Hello, today's video is going to go through the problems on the 2 checks for understanding that I had you complete. Then we're going to dive into the vertex and the properties of quadratics. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to do a bunch more examples of factoring to find x-intercepts and the relationship between the y-intercept. Okay, y-intercept, I set x equal to 0, solve for y. Now, a lot of you got this. From standard form, the y-intercept is just the value of c. It's the constant. Because when we make the x's go to 0, any term that has an x gets canceled. So my y-intercept as an ordered pair is 0, 10. Why that? Again, because we set x equal to 0 and solve for y. Okay, now I'm going to factor. So y equals x squared minus 7x plus 10. A is equal to 1. So I need two numbers that multiply to positive 10 and at the same time add to negative 7. Those two numbers are negative 5 and negative 2. So those values become my factors. So x minus 5 times x minus 2. All right. Then lastly, I find my my x-intercepts. How do I do that? I set y equal to 0 and I solve for x. Okay. So I set y equal to 0 and I'm careful not to replace my x because that's what I'm solving for. Once I'm in factored form, I set each individual factor equal to 0. It creates two mini equations and I solve for x. X is equal to 5 and x is equal to 2. As ordered pairs, 5, 0 and 2, 0 would be my x-intercepts. Check this out. I asked you for this and we had a hard time making this connection. What's the relationship between the factors and the x-intercepts? The factor is x minus 5. The x-intercept is x equals 5. The factor is x minus 2. The solution, the x-intercept, is x equals 2. Factors and your x-intercepts, they're opposites of each other. So if my factor is negative, my x-intercept has to be positive. Okay, one more term we introduced from the notes I had you take. X-intercepts are also, I think they actually use zeros. We'll get into the other terms. Zeros of your function. Okay, these are synonymous terms. All right, so let's try the next one. Y-intercept. The y-intercept is just my value of c. Okay, so my y-intercept would be the ordered pair 0, negative 6. Next, I'm going to factor. So I have y equals 1x squared plus x minus 6. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 6 and at the same time add to positive 1. This really trips students up, but please take your time. 3 times negative 2 gives me negative 6. 3 plus negative 2 gives me positive 1. So x plus 3 is my factor times x minus 2 is my second factor. Okay, my x-intercepts, I set y equal to 0. So that's why we prompt you to factor first. I set y equal to 0. Now I take each factor, I set it equal to 0, creating two simpler, smaller equations. Solving for x, I subtract 3 from both sides, so I get x is equal to negative 3. And I get x is equal to positive 2. And when I write those as ordered pairs, I get negative 3, 0 and 2, 0. Again, what's the relationship between my factors and my x-intercepts? The values are opposites of each other. So the factor is x plus 3. The x-intercept is x equals negative 3. The factor is x minus 2, so the x-intercept is positive 2. Okay, so those were the two questions on the check for understanding from the 20th of March. Then I gave you one on the 26th. Same deal, guys. Same exact deal. And I did have you do this as a form, so you are still able to go back through those and practice them at any time. Now you have the answers. What's your y-intercept? Every time I set x equal to 0 in standard form, my y-intercept is just equal to the value of c. So as an ordered pair, I have 0, 15. When I factor, all right, so what do I have? I need two numbers that multiply to positive 15 and at the same time add to negative 8. Okay, negative 5 times negative 3 gives me positive 15. Negative 5 plus negative 3 gives me negative 8. So I have x minus 5, x minus 3 are give me my factored form. Now my x-intercepts, I set y equal to 0. Okay, set each individual factor equal to 0. Solving this equation, I add 5 to both sides. So I get x is equal to positive 5, x is equal to positive 3. As ordered pairs, I get 5, 0, and 3, 0. All right, then I gave you two graphs. And everybody was good. I gave you the information. All right, just a couple of holes I have to fill in. Vertex, you pick that point out. X-intercepts, y-intercept, all good. Now, one of the multiple choice questions on the form was, your vertex is a minimum when what is true about the value of A? So let's remind ourselves what A is called. A is your lead coefficient. Oh, don't want a black highlighter. Lead coefficient. When my lead coefficient is positive, greater than 0, my parabola opens up and therefore my vertex is a minimum. So when A is greater than 0, your parabola opens up. Okay, that's a very important thing that I don't really think you guys took notice of. It was in the notes from the website. You should have it in your notes, but please make sure you're understanding when A is greater than 0, the parabola opens up. Okay, now I ask you for a possible equation, and this is using the relationship between your x-intercepts and your factors. So I know x is equal to negative 0.5. I'm going to write that as a fraction. X is equal to negative 1/2. I also know my other x-intercept is x is equal to positive 3. So let's go back here. What's the relationship between your x-intercepts and your factors? They're opposites of each other. This equation is solved for x. This equation, it has x and the number on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to use that information to get my factors. So now it's like I'm reverse solving this. So if I wanted to move this negative 1/2, if I wanted to get it all towards the x, first thing I would do is multiply both sides of the equation by 2. So I get 2x equals negative 1. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So now I have 2x plus 1 equals 0. Well, let's again go back. What is this when we have something equal to 0? That something was one of our factors of the equation. So now I know one of my factors is 2x plus 1. Now let's work on this one. This is a little less work. The only thing I have to do, I just got to move the 3 over. So I get x minus 3 is equal to 0. And again, once I solve that equation, once I get that equation set equal to 0, what I'm left with, my highlighter is, these are now my factors. So when I ask you for a possible equation would be y is equal to, one factor is 2x plus 1, and the other factor is x minus 3. So all I want you to work on is recognizing that relationship between the x-intercepts and the factors. Now, I understand from here, you could say, oh, if x is equal to negative 1/2, well, that's easy. I'm just going to add 1/2 to both sides, and I have the equation set equal to 0. Well, it's not wrong, but our coefficients, the numbers that we write in here are always integers. They're always whole numbers. 1/2 is a rational number. It's a fraction. We don't have fractions when we write our answers, when we factor equations, okay? All right, so number 3 gave this one. Aside from you just inputting errors incorrectly into the form, you got it okay. Please just be aware of your scale, guys. So a lot of people told me 1/2 for this. Well, it's not 1/2. When I look at my scale just goes by 2 boxes to make one whole unit. All right, please be careful. All right, so now a possible equation. Well, x is equal to negative 2 and x is equal to 4. All right, these are both one-steppers. I'm going to add 2. I get that equal to 0. I'm going to subtract 4. I get that equal to 0. Once I get the equation set equal to 0, these are now my factors. All right, a little bit easier when we don't have any fractions. So I have y is equal to x plus 2 times x minus 4. But notice now my parabola opens down. So when a parabola opens down, the vertex is the highest point on the graph. It's a maximum. And when does that happen? When my lead coefficient is negative. When a is less than 0, my parabola opens down. Okay. Well, so let's go back. If a is positive, if your lead coefficient is positive, your parabola opens up. Your vertex is the smallest point on the graph. It's a minimum. When a is less than 0, when your lead coefficient is a negative number, your parabola opens down and your vertex is the highest point on the graph. Okay, now let's check that out then. My lead coefficient, my lead coefficient has to be negative. My lead coefficient has to be negative. According to the possible equation we wrote, if we foiled that out, a would be positive, and therefore my parabola would open up. But according to the graph, my parabola opens down. How do I fix it? I just put a negative out front. And that negative out front will ensure that if I multiplied everything out, it would make my parabola open down. Okay, so what I want you to do today, take these 3 quadratics, determine the y-intercept, factor, and then the x-intercepts for each of these equations. Then you're going to go back to Teams and go to the March 31st Check for Understanding assignment, and you're going to enter your answers in. Everything's a question, and that'll allow you to check your solutions. Be careful on this one with factoring. A is not equal to 1. So when we factored that, we used our guess and check method. Where did 2x and x come from? Oh, I keep doing that. Sorry, guys. 2x times x gives me my 2x squared here. All right, I didn't realize I didn't have an example of that in the video, but you have plenty examples of that. Oh, man. In classwork that we've previously completed. Okay, please do not hesitate to go back to stuff we've already done to check out solutions. That'll do it. Thank you.